Assalamualaikum. Welcome back. Okay, as we have seen in previous lesson, we have seen example on how we can handle exception by using try and catch block. So try and catch block can also be complemented by this finally block. So finally block is an optional. So it is not compulsory for you to have this block in your try and catch block. What happens is that finally clause contains statements that will always be executed, regardless whether an exception occurred or not. Okay, this is one thing about finally, as its name implies. Finally, so statements located inside this block will always be executed, regardless of the outcome. So this is an example of trace execution of program. So let's say you have these statements and suppose there is no exceptions occur. It will straight away goes to this finally block. It will always be executed and then it goes to the rest of the statements in the methods. So let's say an exception of type exception 1 occur, and let's say it is thrown in the second statement. So what will happen is that this particular catch block will be executed. So the exception is handled by this particular block. And still, statements that you include in the finally block will always be executed. And the rest, it will proceed with the rest of the statements in your program. Okay, some cautions whenever using exceptions. Bear in mind that exception handling usually requires more time and resources. Why? This is because it requires to instantiate or to create a new exception object. Okay, so instantiating a new exception object, rolling back to the call stack, and propagating the errors to the calling methods, this will incur some resources. So we should be cautious here because there are situations where we should handle exception and there are situations where we don't need. Okay. So when to throw an exception? So an exception can occur in the method. So if you want the exception to be processed by the caller, then you can create an exception object and throw it, as what we have seen in the previous example, where in the method, you declare an exception and then you have a statement to throw the exception object. So the caller part, the caller method will actually be responsible to handle the exception. Okay. When should you use the try catch block in the code? You should use it to deal with unexpected error conditions. And by right, you should not use it when dealing with simple and expected situations, like this example. Okay, so actually these statements can be simplified. You don't need a try catch block over here, because the problem here is that you are checking whether there is a null pointer exception errors or not. So by right, you can actually rewrite this by using this if statement. As long as ref1 is not null, because when this is null, you cannot actually call this toString method, for instance. You cannot print out the object, that's all. But this program is expected. This program is expected because this error will definitely occur whenever your ref1, for instance, is null or no object is being created. Okay, so in this case, we can avoid using the try catch block for this situation. Right? So that is why, as we have seen before, there are unchecked and checked exceptions. Okay, for those unchecked exceptions like runtime error, okay, for instance, you don't need to handle the errors by using the try catch block. However, errors like, for example, IO exceptions, okay, a class not found, so we need to handle by using try and catch. So use the exception classes in the API whenever possible, right? And if let's say the predefined classes is not sufficient, you may create your own custom exception classes, right? Defining custom exception classes can be done by extending exception class, or you create a class which is a subclass of exception class. Okay, let's have a look at these examples. Yeah. So in this example, there is a method known setRadius. So this method will throw an exception if the radius value is negative. So suppose you wish to pass the radius to the handler, so you can create a custom exception class. So let's have a look at this example. Invalid radius exception. This is one. Okay, and the other class is circle with radius exception. This one. And the other one is test circle. Okay. So under the test circle with radius exception, under this class, this is the main class. Okay, the main class that you will execute. And you have the try and catch statement. Alright? So in the try block, what happens is that you are trying to create an object, yeah, object called circle with radius exception, and let's say call it C1, yeah, and then you call setRadius method, but passing a negative value, right? So what will happen is that when you set a radius and just now you pass a negative value, so this is unacceptable because by right radius must be positive. Yeah, so the new radius value will be assigned only if the value passed is positive, and in this case it will actually throw an exception object. So this is the kind of exception object where you actually create this class on your own. You did not use the predefined exception class. Okay, so invalid radius exception is your own defined exception class, and as you see here, you extend exception. So this is actually an exception class because you are a subclass of exception class. So in this particular class, you can define your own method. Yeah. For instance, over here in the constructor, you can say that if you can say this method invalid radius. For instance, if the radius value just now is negative. So as you can see here, this particular method will actually throw this particular object, invalid radius, which is a custom exception class. Okay, so throwing this will actually calling the caller method. In this case, the main method. Yeah, because the main method is the one that called to this method, and the error will be processed by this catch block. Alright, as you see here. So you need this invalid radius exception where this is the class that you have defined, and then you will print out your error. So this invalid radius exception, this kind of exception is not a predefined exception. This is your own defined exception class. So you can do so, yeah. So by defining your own customary class, right? So with that, that is all about this exception handling. So acknowledgements to Daniel Liang. Introduction to Java Programming Comprehensive Version. This is the main text for this particular topic. So that is all. I hope that you benefit from these lessons. Thank you.